All right, guys, we're going to continue moving on. It's what we do in math. We always keep moving. So last time we were working with in and out functions. We were working with something that has one basic rule, and then we were graphing it. All right, so how do you move on from graphing one rule? Naturally, we graph two rules. All right, so that's the 5th grade standard we're going to be taking a look at today. Is we're going to be taking a look at graphing two different rules simultaneously. So let's take a look at what I asked you to do first. So the first problem on here, Mr. Lee and Ms. Romero's classes are competing to see who can collect the most books. The amount of books collected is displayed below. All right, great. Now it says create a coordinate grid to compare the amounts collected by the two classes. What'd you notice? And then it's got extra questions. But I noticed the first thing we needed to do is we need to create a coordinate grid. So that needs to be almost our first step. I can't make a coordinate grid yet, though. So thinking out there, why can't I make a coordinate grid yet? So pause it for a second. Hit the pause button. Think about it. Why can't I yet? Good. Did you think about it? About half of you didn't. You just let the keep rolling. All right. I can't make a coordinate grid graph yet because I need ordered pairs. Okay. That's how you make those grid points. So the biggest mistake that people make when they do two different things like this is they like to say, all right, my first spot is 4, 8. My second spot is 10, 12. My third spot is 16, 16. But here's the problem. These numbers in the story are not related to each other. So they should not be a pair. When we look at this, you should just imagine, look at Mr. Lee's class. We're going to make a graph for him. He has a rule for what's happening with his. Okay? So when we take a look at his, that's going to give us our ordered pair. So what's going on with Mr. Lee's class? So for Mr. Lee, so we'll start with him for a second. So for Mr. Lee, I know what's going on with his numbers. They're going 4, 10, 16. But why are they doing that? What are we comparing it to? We're not comparing it just to Miss Romero's class because they're not really related. What Miss Romero does not affect what Mr. Lee's class is doing. The only thing we have that we could really compare it to is the days. The first day, Mr. Lee had 4. The second day, he had 10. The third day, he had 16. Those are the numbers we can actually compare that we can use to make our grid. So when we have these two patterns like this, we're comparing them not directly to each other, 4, 8, 10, 12, 16. No, what we're taking a look at is we've got to build our coordinate grid, and we're going to do one class at a time. So imagine Mr. Lee's, Miss Romero's class wasn't here, and we were just graphing this. That's what we did at first. We started off and we said, all right, this is what he did on the first day, on the second day, and the third day. Now, once we have the ordered pairs built for Mr. Lee, then we need to build them for Miss Romero. We're going to do the same thing. Pretend like Mr. Lee isn't here, because what Mr. Lee does not affect Miss Romero's class. So Miss Romero has the exact same basic idea. On day 1, she has 8. On day 2, she has 12. On day 3, she has 16. And I could write out all of them that we have, so then I can go ahead and go graph it. So I would take these ordered pairs and I'd graph Mr. Lee's, and I'd take these ordered pairs and I'd graph Miss Romero's. So go ahead and make sure you have that set because we're going to take a look at it in just a second. Okay, so exit out of here and pause. All right, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at some of these quick graphs. So Mr. Lee's class. Mr. Lee on day 1 had 4. On day 2, he had 10. On day 3, he has 16. And on day 4, he's got 22. There we go. So I could connect these together. Ideally, I probably should use a ruler but my art skills are so awesome, I can do a pretty good job without it. All right, now the one thing I would recommend if you're doing more than one graph, okay, one, if you're comparing them, like the questions ask, you want them on the same graph. So if we're doing two lines, same graph, but then label it. This is Mr. Lee. Otherwise, you're going to put this down and get distracted, and you're going to forget whose is whose. All right, now my next one. All right, on day one, Miss Romero was at 8. Then on day 2, she was at 12. On day 3, she was also at 16. But on day 4, she started to fall behind and was only there. So now taking a look, that's her graph right there. All right, so noticing for the most part, they look very similar, okay? But we do have a slight cross in between them. Now I could go through and I could start answering questions about it. So taking a look at it, I forgot. I should probably label her Romero. All right, so looking at it, things that I would be wondering is, why does Mr. Lee's graph go up faster than Miss Romero's? Why did they cross over? Is there a point where they cross over? So those would be the questions I would ask. Now, we're going to go back and we're going to look at those charts that we built a minute ago, and we're going to think about it. What's Mr. Lee going up by? He went 1-4, then he went 2-10, then he went 3-16. Okay, that was his graph. Okay, those were the numbers I used, and even 4-22. That was Mr. Lee. Whereas Miss Romero did what? 1-8, then she did 2-12, 3-16, and then 4-20. Okay, so taking a look at it, we have a slightly different one. If I was looking at trying to figure out some pattern or some reason why, one, I know looking at the chart that there's something different about these rules, okay? Because if this was a basic simple rule, they would both be going up at the same slope. So there must be some sort of multiplication or division. So this is one of those tricky ones where there's actually more than one rule that's affecting both of these as we're going through. So when we take a look at it, for me to get from 1 to 4, yeah, it's times 4. To get from 2 to 10, it's not times 4. So there's more than one piece on this, but I did notice that Mr. Lee's, each day he was adding 6 more on. And I noticed that in Miss Romero's, each day she was only getting 4 more each time. So I'm assuming that's one of the things that's influencing why Mr. Lee ended up passing her, because each day he's getting 2 more than what Miss Romero was. So let's look at those questions that they had there for us. So on which day did they collect the same amount? Day 3. Who collected more on day 6? Well, after day 3, Mr. Lee was always gaining more. Who collected more on day 2? Well, before day 3, it was Miss Romero. That's day 3 is the point where they came together and Mr. Lee started to pass her. So we could use the graph, we could use a table to answer those. There's a lot of different things that we can do. For today, when you're taking a look, generally speaking, when we make 2 graphs, 2 lines, think about what they did with it. So this is one set of data from Mr. Lee, and this is one different set of data from Miss Romero. If they don't have anything to do with each other, then those aren't the numbers you're using to build your ordered pairs. A lot of the times when we do these types of problems where you're building ordered pairs, you're building it, comparing it to some third set. And this one, it gave it to us right across the top, the days of the week. We compare each of them to what day they did. A lot of them are similar to that as you move forward. So really be careful and pay attention to it. The biggest thing to pay attention to is if one of these does not affect the other one, then you shouldn't be combining them into a graph, okay? The days of the week is what's affecting their numbers. So that's what we should have been comparing both of them to. All right, so you're going to try a couple of those out. I didn't give you a ton of them today because these take a little bit longer, but definitely try your best. You definitely need more graph paper for today, so take your time, do a great job, and we will see you guys later on. Hopefully you make it in today.